Hello, everyone, and welcome today to the Caregiver Toolbox. Today's session is going to be caregiver burnout. How do you prevent it? How do you recognize it when it's happening? And what do you do about it when it does? I'm Patty Callahan. I'm a social worker and a caregiver advocate with the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging.
And I'm Paula Tolliver. I work with Patty, and I'm also a social worker, and I work with families. So today we're going to just kind of show you an outline. We're going to talk first about some common emotions and some warning signs. We're going to talk a little bit about clinical depression, and then we're going to give you some suggestions for alleviating stress and preventing burnout. So first of all, we wanted to kind of people always ask us, what is common? I don't know if the word normal is good, but what is typical when you are caring for another individual? And we feel like we always have to say that it is very, very common to almost feel like you're on a roller coaster when you're caring for someone else. You may experience lots of emotions and maybe all in the same day. And so just to say that experiencing lots of different emotions, and some of those emotions, by the way, are quite uncomfortable. They're not always comfortable, but this is very common. This is very typical. This doesn't necessarily indicate that someone is burned out or depressed. It is just very typical. So it's typical to experience anger, to experience grief, because the person who you're caring for is not like they were before oftentimes. And so, sometimes you're grieving the person that they were, or that they, maybe some of the things that you had wanted to do. So grief is pretty common. It can be embarrassing at times, particularly when people have cognitive behaviors that maybe are not, understood well by those on the outside. It can be very isolating also, because people oftentimes take themselves out of social situations, and so it can be very isolating, and you can feel like you're the only one. And this is sometimes, in fact, well-meaning family and friends don't come around as much, or there's not as many opportunities to be in social situations. Helplessness and worry are common. People get very frustrated, and even though they love the other person, it can be very frustrating to care for people with certain kinds of illnesses and disabilities. Guilt is very common. In fact, I always say, guilt is one of those things that you can't really get rid of in the caregiving process. Sometimes you just have to be with it and know that it's going to be part of, the process. Oftentimes we have guilt for feeling like we're not doing enough, even though we're doing everything we can. Sometimes we have guilt for, keeping ourselves healthy while the other person is not healthy. On the other hand, increased closeness can sometimes happen, and joy and laughter. And, it's not that it is all, for most people, a negative experience. It can also be a very positive experience, and people can experience great joy and great closeness. So again, people may feel like they're on quite a roller coaster during this process.
And we know that it can take a lot of mental energy to manage those more uncomfortable emotions that Paula was just discussing. And on top of the day-to-day hands-on care and the stresses that can also cause, we know that caregivers can be at great risk for burnout. And so the key there in trying to prevent that from happening, or to alleviate some of the symptoms from that, is to really pay attention to yourself and self-monitor how you're feeling. And so we wanted to give you some red flags to kind of be on the lookout for, to let you know that perhaps things are getting more over the top. So one of the red flags that we really want to look at here is when we become a little bit irritated over every little thing. Now that means that sometimes, we're just getting pulled in so many different directions and trying to care for a loved one, that little by little, there's just got to be some irritation, and that may be due to exhaustion, again, both physical and mental exhaustion. And I know personally for myself, I have maybe a little bit of a dry sense of humor, but boy, when I lose my sense of humor and can't laugh about a situation, find some thread of humor in it, I'm in trouble. And again, that means that life has just gotten too stressful. And these are all, again, symptoms that we want you to just pay attention to. They're indicators that you're going to have to take some kind of action to make sure that you're reducing some of the stress that you're experiencing and caring for a loved one. Sleep disturbances are certainly a big part of that. Maybe it's waking at unusual hours and not being able to get into a really deep sleep. That's where you get a very restful sleep. And again, many times you're trying to kind of sleep and at the same time be a bit vigilant in making sure that your loved one is safe. And that means you're not getting a good, deep, restful sleep. And our brains have to have that. That's if we don't get it, then that is when we become perhaps irritated over every little thing. And you can, and just as you might not be getting enough or be getting enough sleep, you might also be getting too much sleep. Sometimes if life gets to be too stressful, we want to hide under the covers, and that's certainly understandable. And if you're sleeping more than what we would typically expect, then that can be concerning too. And just if every day you're getting up and thinking, I don't know how I can do this, I don't know if I can do this one more day, then again, that's an indicator that something's got to give. And it's easy to become angry over the situation and perhaps look to, blame others in our world about where things are at this given moment. And if this is becoming more the rule than the exception, then and you're finding yourself feeling like this more often, then that also is another indicator of potential burnout. And we know that overwhelmed is probably the way most caregivers that are doing a lot of day-to-day care, that's how they would describe how they feel. And it's, many different, their time is going in many different directions. It's a juggling act. And sometimes it's just too much. And that's an indicator when we really need to be taking some steps to help ourselves have a little more time to see to our own physical and mental health. Sometimes a caregiver, you're going to have difficulty just concentrating. Your attention's pulled in a lot of different directions. And sometimes it just gets to the point where it's difficult to focus. You may see some physical symptoms, stomach distress, weight loss, or weight gain. Particularly pay attention if you've had to feel like you've had to make use of alcohol or drugs in an increasing amount just to get through. That's a definite worry for sure. And just, we know sometimes that it's difficult for caregivers to get out to their own medical appointments and to just do the things they need to do for themselves. And if your own health is clearly being compromised by needing to provide care, again, that's an indicator something's got to give. If you are not participating in some of the things that you usually enjoyed, and often caregivers' time to do these things gets eroded gradually to the point where you don't even recognize that, I've given up going swimming, I've given up taking a walk, I've given up just doing some little things that I did just to enjoy life. Then we have to take some steps to give ourselves a little more time to do some of those things again. And we can help you later on in this workshop. We'll give you some suggestions to get that time back into your day. And of course, if you feel like you have to do it all, that's just the sister to feeling overwhelmed. And Sometimes we have to delegate. We have to make some decisions over what absolutely has to be done. And again, as I've said all the way through, if you experience one or more of these symptoms, it's time to take some action. Sometimes there are little things that you can do that don't take a lot of time. And we'll talk about those a little further along today, that can still give you a little bit of a break, even if it's not as long of a break as perhaps you really need. We just have to carve out just that little bit of time here and there to give yourself just a little bit of relief. Otherwise, without taking some steps, you are carrying a lot of responsibility here, and many other things can be impacted if you are not able to perform in the way that is the optimum functioning for you.
So we wanted to talk about just quickly an issue called clinical depression. Though, in a lot of ways, the name clinical depression isn't really a great name, because many of us can talk about the word depression, talking about maybe a low feeling or a mood, the blues, a person feeling sorry for himself, feeling stress, laziness. All of these can sometimes, that word can be used to indicate those. But in fact, we know that clinical depression is in fact a treatable illness, and it's related to a biochemical imbalance in the brain of the chemicals in the brain that regulate mood. And so just to say that it really is an illness, it's based in the chemistry of the brain. And so what can clinical depression be caused by? Many things can cause this biochemical imbalance. Losses, recent deaths of family or close friends, sometimes chronic illnesses. The two big ones are recent stroke or heart attack. Sometimes when people are on medications to treat something else, it can cause the chemistry in the brain to become unbalanced. And then sometimes biochemical changes in the body due to other kinds of illnesses can certainly cause a person to experience this clinical depression. And so when we talk about the symptoms of clinical depression, they are very similar to the symptoms that Patty mentioned for stress and burnout. However, the difference is actually in degree, in a way. So usually the person experiences two or more of them, and they last at least 2 weeks, so that they don't kind of come and go. With stress and burnout, sometimes you can kind of experience this. Yes, one day I'm feeling, this is going on. Another day, something else is going on. And so with clinical depression, you see really people experiencing these symptoms kind of on an ongoing basis for more than 2 weeks. And in fact, we do include thoughts of suicide, or if someone has experienced a suicide attempt. This is a sign and symptom of the illness depression. So how do we treat clinical depression? Usually the best treatments are a combination, not just one, just one of these. But the two big kinds of treatment we use are counseling or coaching. Sometimes we will call this talk therapy. It can be with an individual counselor, it can be with a group. There are different kinds of counseling available depending on what's going on in a person's life. And then, of course, we also have many different kinds of medications. And just to say, that before 1987, we had very few medications that treated depression successfully. Now we have about between 27 and 30 of these medications. Some are mild, some are a little bit stronger. And so, there has been a huge difference in terms of the amount or the numbers of medications that are available that are pretty effective at, and I say that when we talk about treatment for depression, in a way, and I don't mean to kind of downplay depression, it's a serious illness, but in a way, what we're doing when we're treating depression is we're treating the symptoms of depression so that the body can reestablish the biochemical balance correctly. And so it's a little bit like a cold in the sense, and I'm not saying, depression and a cold are the same, but when you have a cold, your body actually fights the cold, and the cold is relieved by your body fighting it. But the medication that you take and the other kinds of treatments you may do for the cold are going to relieve your symptoms so that you feel better, and your body then is able to fight it. Okay, so I liken depression a little bit to that, and that is that treatments are available that can make a person feel much, much, much better, and then the chemistry in the brain gets reestablished. And so where to go for help or more information? The first person, probably the best person, is your doctor. We've also put in some other references here. If you're at work, your employee assistance program can certainly help. Also, there are some national organizations that have very good information on their websites: the National Institute for Mental Health, the National Mental Health Association, and the National Foundation for Depressive Illness.
So what are some things that we can do to alleviate stress and prevent burnout? Well, we know that for caregivers, it's incredibly hard, but it is also very important to look at setting some healthy boundaries in their role as a caregiver and perhaps in other aspects of their life as well. You are caring for someone who has definitely some challenges with their independence, and it's very easy sometimes to try to do everything possible to make life better for that person. But sometimes, and particularly when people may or may not be as understanding of all that you're doing for them, they can sometimes be a little demanding. And so even though, you want to do everything you can for this person, it's sometimes easy to lose sight that perhaps you need to set some limits. And this isn't, it's very hard for a caregiver, but you're not punishing the person that you're caring for by doing this. You're actually in the long run going to help them, because that means you're going to be available to provide their care longer. So just don't look at it as any sort of punishment if you have to set some limits about your response to demands from your care receiver on your time. And sometimes it can be helpful to just stop, take stock of the situation, decide on what a realistic limit might be, and even, formalize it, write it down, and then see how well you can stick to it. Sometimes you have to make some changes. This is a behavior change for you, and it's going to force a behavior change on the part of your loved one. So obviously, you have to see how it goes, and then perhaps revise your plan. But again, the more that you practice this and the more you stick to it, the better in the long run you're going to feel, the longer you're going to be able to provide care. And this could be, in terms of, okay, you're running to the store for a loved one, but they're calling you and demanding that you go every day. Okay, perhaps we have to say, let's make a list and I'll go a couple times a week. And that's just one example of where you might need to set a boundary on running errands, or just even how many trips up and down the stairs in a given day. Whatever it is that's creating the stress, then again, take stock of it, write it down, and don't worry if you have to make some changes to make it work. And it's really important for a caregiver to examine what your expectations are of yourself, of your loved one, um, and perhaps your family. Sometimes I will often tell caregivers, get rid of the shoulds. The shoulds can get us into trouble and sometimes set us up for some unrealistic expectations. And we can beat ourselves up with them. And we can get very angry at family, perhaps when they don't rise to the occasion in providing the help that we feel we need. And it's important to really examine your expectations of your loved one. Um, Perhaps you're expecting them to, be able to do more than they can. Perhaps you're also, not expecting them to do some things and you're jumping in and doing them for them. And so sometimes it's important to get a better read on whether a loved one can be a little more independent and allowing them to do that. That only is helpful to them in the long run. So again, that's one expectation that you need to think about. Is there perhaps more you can do to teach someone to help themselves a little more? And I always say, often we know in situations, in caregiving situations, um, the actual primary caregiver is the one that's doing all of it or most of the care for a loved one. And if you've reached out to family and for whatever reason they haven't stepped up, let it go, drop it. The more that you think about this and the more you work yourself up into, a lot of distress over it, the more you're putting out some precious energy that you need for yourself. So if you have put it out there, there are certain tasks you need assistance with and family are not responding, then we'll have to look other directions for that help. And we're happy here at the Area Agency on Aging to help you do that. But let it go. Don't continue to ruminate on it and upset yourself more. And again, every day, there's only so many hours in a day. And what can you realistically expect that you're going to be able to accomplish in a given day? And give yourself, again, some opportunities for relief along the way through the day, even if they're short breaks. But understand that you have to let go of perfectionism. No one is able to do it all and do it perfectly all the time. Those absolutes, those alls can be dangerous and really, again, set yourself up for some really stressful times for yourself if you feel like you're not meeting your expectations. And that's not the idea. The idea is to take it a little easier on yourself.
So another suggestion is to really kind of think about what we call respite care. Now, respite care basically is a fancy word that just means a break. Respite care can be someone coming in to give you a break, and so you can go get grocery shopping done or do something enjoyable. Respite care can be having the person go someplace, and this is where there are adult day health services that allow someone to go and experience some activities and some oversight for the day. There are also respite care can also be a longer term stay, maybe in a assisted living or a nursing facility for a few days. Maybe you need to go out of town to attend someone's wedding and or you just really need a break. There are lots of different kinds of respite care situations, but we absolutely say to caregivers for them, you really do need to get respite in some way. And it doesn't always have to be a formal program. Maybe it's just having a son or daughter come over and stay with an individual, but as much as possible, consider, respite care. We also recommend consider attending a support group. In the days of the pandemic, support groups are also are oftentimes available virtually. They can be available live as well. Here at the Area Agency on Aging, we offer a caregiver support group for people who are caring for someone with dementia. It's every Monday morning from 10 to 11:30. We are happy to have anybody attend. All you need to do is let us know and we'll send you the invitation. And we also have, when we talk about the guides at the end of the session today, you'll see that we actually have a support group guide that we put out that has a listing of various providers who offer support groups. Many of the disease associations and other kind of local community groups offer different kinds of support groups. And support groups are not necessarily therapy. They're not necessarily facilitated by professionals. Many times they're facilitated by people who have walked your walk. They're facilitated oftentimes by caregivers or others who have been in your shoes. Again, some of them are facilitated by professionals. It just really depends. But it can be very, very helpful to be able to talk to people that have been through what you've been through. And oftentimes, caregivers can share with each other tips and techniques and how they did things and how they coped. It can be a very, very helpful and fruitful experience.
And we know it's absolutely vital for a caregiver to take care of their own physical and emotional health. At the same time, we know that your time is very limited to do that. And so some of the suggestions we give you here are things that allow you to maybe scale down some things that helped you cope under more normal times. It may not be that you can do some of the things that you've done in the past that are stress relievers for you, or that, kind of give you a bit of a step away from the caregiving role. But scale some of those things down, and you can still maybe do them to a little extent. Again, look for those little mini vacations. So give yourself a treat. Maybe get a massage if you can. Go shopping. Buy yourself some flowers. Get an ice cream cone. Just little things that are going to boost your day a little bit. Perhaps think of something that is a total waste of time, and then do it. Again, it doesn't have to be half a day. It could be an hour, a half hour, whatever you can devote. But take a break every day, even if it's only 10 or 20 minutes. Maybe watch a sunrise, watch a sunset, go out and pick dandelions in the yard. Whatever lets you step outside of the caregiving role for a little bit and clear your mind. You might want to take a brisk walk. That can also relieve some muscle tension. Maybe just doing some gentle yoga stretches. You don't have to do a whole yoga routine. Again, this is about thinking about how to scale down some of the things that you may have done in your life previously, just to what fits the time that you have available. And then it also doesn't mean that you'll frustrate yourself trying to work these things in. You're doing them in the time that you have available. You might consider getting a pet. That totally depends on whether or not you have the energy to manage a pet at this point. Along with everything else, if you happen to have a pet, one thing we know is just spending time with an animal, stroking an animal lowers blood pressure. It is a huge stress reliever. So that might be something that would be helpful to you too. You might take up a new hobby. You might actually, again, downsize a previous hobby. If you're used to gardening and you put in a huge garden every year, but that's not possible anymore, then maybe you just spend a little time doing some container gardening. Just transplanting African violets, something little that's manageable in the time you have. Again, something that's not going to, frustrate you or stress you more. That's not the idea. Sometimes, we don't always encourage people to do stress eating, but if you can just get a little healthy snack like Cheerios and milk before bed, maybe that'll help you sleep a little better. Um, Caffeine can be a real problematic substance, and it can prevent you from getting a good night's sleep, particularly late in the afternoon. So if you've had that cup of coffee a little too late, that might actually interrupt your night's sleep. So really look at what you're doing in terms of caffeine. I know that a lot of us feel like we have to have that to get through, but maybe cut it off so that you're not getting it close to bedtime. And again, exercise, just trying to eat as much of a balanced diet as you can, and make sure that you're getting in there for your regular medical checkups. It was never more vital than when you're in the caregiving role. You might have some time to make a phone call here and there to just reconnect with an old friend. Let them know what's going on in your life. I know it's easy to lose relationships when you're responsible for caring for a loved one. So maybe while a loved one is resting or whatever, you can maybe make a phone call and just try to reconnect. Or you might even develop some new friendships, perhaps people who have entered your orbit as you've started into caregiving. And then sometimes you can be a support to each other. But try to keep some balance in your day. The balance is what's so, so important. And again, that might be some time with nurturing a relationship with another family member. It might be a little bit of downtime. Whatever it is, it's going to help you get just a little more balance. That's where we get into trouble, is when we lose that, and it's just go 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 from morning to night. That's not balance. And we know how hard it is to focus on your own needs when you have a loved one who has a lot of care needs. But the reality is that self-care is never a luxury. It is a necessity for all of us at any time in our lives. There are also some relaxation techniques that you might want to consider trying. And you will find that information in our handouts, a little more detailed information on how to actually do some of these things. One is awareness breathing or deep breathing. That particularly in a stressful moment can help ease some of that and help you relax a little bit and think a little more clearly about what's happening. You might try a relaxing sigh. Again, these things kind of just refocus your attention from whatever it is that's stressing you and give you an opportunity to kind of clear out your thinking. You might try some imagery or visualization. There are all sorts of different relaxation imagery tapes or CDs that you can get to help guide you through a relaxing image that's going to, again, take you away from the caregiving role for a little bit, or just doing some stretches. There are all kinds of CDs out there that can guide you through some very gentle stretches that also will ease some of that muscle tension, in addition to just the mental stress as well.
And then we just had some suggestions in terms of sleep. Sometimes we don't pay as much attention to sleep. We pay more attention to food, which is good, and breathing, which is good. But sleep is very important. Most of us will need between 7.5 and 8.5 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And by that, I mean, you may get up and go to the restroom, but you're not getting up for any extended period of time. And this amount of sleep is really important to rest and restore your mind and your body. the amount of sleep you need may vary from person to person, but it is very, very important. So we just have some suggestions. First of all, Patty already talked about kind of building this balance into the day, but sometimes building the balance into the day or organizing the day can also help with sleep. Getting up at the same time every day, kind of organizing so that you're eating around the same time every day, going to bed around the same time every night. These can all be very, very helpful in terms of just kind of establishing those patterns. Sometimes establish relaxing rituals before bedtime, and this can be something as little as just brushing your teeth or kind of calming down or doing some kind of everyday kinds of things. Bright light, we know, tends to kind of waken up our bodies, and so it is important to kind of avoid bright lights. And in fact, even in the middle of the night, we recommend having night lights around to guide you in going to the restroom or whatever, and not really turning on bright lights, because bright lights are always going to kind of signal to your body to wake up. We recommend as much as possible to reserve your bed for sleeping, and maybe not to just be watching TV and spending lots of time, there. Maybe do that in another part of the house, so your body kind of gets accustomed to the bed as a sleeping place. We already talked about some stimulants in the afternoons, primarily caffeine, but also remember that if you are a smoker or use tobacco products, nicotine is also a stimulant. So kind of think about what kind of stimulants you're putting into your body, and try not to do that too close to bedtime. This is also true for alcohol, because even though alcohol is a sedative, it tends to disrupt the sleep patterns because it tends to dehydrate your brain just a little bit. And so sometimes with alcohol, what can happen is you can go to sleep right away, but then you're awake later. Just kind of think about your use of those kinds of products. Exercising, and sometimes when I say exercising, people get this image of like vigorous, whatever, running at the gym, but exercising can be really as gentle as stretching before bed or stretching in the evenings, or just kind of getting moving. I think sometimes people get into the habit of sitting in a chair and maybe watching TV or watching, and that's a big portion of their day. And this is true, by the way, for the person you're caring for as well, is that I sometimes find that people are sitting and napping a lot of the day, and then they're awake at night. So if you're going to nap, napping's not bad, but try and nap the same time and limit that amount of time. So kind of get up and get moving if you possibly can. Some medications can cause insomnia, especially if you if you haven't had trouble sleeping and now you're having trouble sleeping. One of the things to look at is, have you changed medications recently? Because some medications can really cause a problem. Obviously, kind of thinking about your sleeping environment. Is it quiet? Is it dark? Is it, does it cause you to be able to sleep? Sometimes people need to actually have a little bit of noise when they sleep. One of our daughters was having a lot of trouble sleeping when she was in her early 20s, and she finally started putting a noise machine that has kind of a gentle noise, and that is what did the trick. And so she now pretty much sleeps with that all the time as well. And then, sometimes I recommend, and I do this myself, if you can't go to sleep, maybe get up and do something quiet, or again, eat a bowl of cereal. Milk actually can, in people who can tolerate it, does tend to stimulate sleepiness. So cereal or something like that is sometimes helpful if you can. But you don't want anything too sugary, because sugary is going to kind of, or caffeinated. But so sometimes you can kind of do a gentle activity, and it can kind of bring that sense of sleep on. One of the things that we caution you about is be very careful about using over-the-counter sleep products. They're all over the shelves. Talk to your doctor before you would, if you would use any of those products, because some of those products, in particular, the Benadryl products, for people who are older, are not always a great idea. They can cause all sorts of other health related concerns. And so be very careful about using those products and really only use them if a doctor has kind of said that's okay. And the other issue about that is if you are going to use those products, use them very sparingly. Don't get in the habit of using them all the time, because again, those products can interfere with other kinds of medication you're taking, and they can also cause side effects.
And about 20 years ago now, there began to be more of a realization that family caregivers in the United States are the backbone of long-term care. That's to the tune, and the last figures tell us, of $470 billion of unpaid home care a year in the United States. But we also know that caregiving can come at a cost for the caregiver, physically, emotionally, and sometimes financially. So back in 2000, under the Older Americans Act, a program was added specifically for family caregivers to help them find whatever assistance might be available to them in their caregiving role, and to perhaps alleviate some initial stresses. And that's the National Family Caregiver Support Program. And all of the area agencies on aging in the U.S. receive this funding. Provides for workshops such as this and all sorts of educational materials. But it also funds some concrete services that are intended to provide some short-term relief to family caregivers. And we term that respite care. And respite care can be managed sometimes in the home with aides coming in. It can be a loved one going out to an adult daycare program for all or part of a day, or it might be a short-term stay in a care facility. And these kinds of services are provided for under the National Family Caregiver Support Program. There's also a category of services that's a little bit flexible. We know that sometimes the finances can take a pretty hard hit, especially if a caregiver gives up their job to provide care or cuts back work hours. And so we'll take a look at whatever situation is brought to our attention and see how best to assist you. And the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging's Family Caregiver Support Program is set up so that we have a partner agency in each of our 8 counties. And we've listed on this slide the contact agencies where you can go specifically for the caregiver program. Many of these agencies provide other services that can assist you in caregiving or assist an older loved one with services. They are the focal point for aging services in their counties. And no one really has to start with us at the Area Agency on Aging, but they're certainly welcome to call, and we'll connect you with whatever help that we can in your situation. But you can also go directly to these agencies and ask about some help through their Family Caregiver Support Program. So please do reach out for help. Don't struggle. And then we have also, as part of our program here at the Area Agency on Aging, produced a number of guides that actually expand on information that is actually in our big guide, which is the Older Adult Resource Guide. There you see on the page, that's the lavender guide up there at the top. That's now is actually green in 2022. That's kind of like phone book for aging services, and it is 8 counties worth of resource information. The next booklet there you see in orange is the Caregiver's Toolbox, and that is a manual for family caregivers that really compiles much of the information that we've shared today and in other workshops that we have available on our website. It's very comprehensive and covers a wide range of topics related to caregiving. One of our guides is specifically for family caregivers who will not be accessing a government-funded program for help for in caring for their loved one, but will be paying privately. And then sometimes the piece you lose there is a case manager who can be very vital in being sort of a go-to person that can guide you in in caring for a loved one, but there are services out there that can even provide that assistance as a fee-based service. So if you're not going to be accessing services through a publicly funded program, this guide gives you some providers, organizations that do home delivered meals, companies that provide the emergency response systems, a whole listing there in the guide, and it explains, what considerations you might want to be looking at if you are going to be hiring a private self-employed individual, or if you're going through an agency. It's just some things to be thinking about depending on what route you go in providing care for a loved one. There are some other guides there that are specific to certain resources in the community like transportation and prescription assistance. And there is a guide, the long-term care and hospice guide lists all the care facilities, adult care homes, nursing facilities, and assisted living facilities in our 8-county service area. These are all on our website, and we're more than happy to mail you a hard copy if you'd like. We thank you so much for joining us today. If you have questions, feel free to call us at the 645-7250 number. We'll be more than happy to consult with you on your individual caregiving situation.
We'd also like to direct you to the fact that the handouts for this session are also available on the website where you access this video. So just download the handouts and it kind of walks along with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.